Mom will live with us, and your parents can manage just fine on the balcony, my husband declared in my parents' apartment where we were living. Half an hour later, my mother-in-law was already hauling in her suitcases. That's when my father smiled and calmly said, "And before we start, I'll ask you to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and enjoy listening." Vera stood by the window of her room, looking out at the gray November courtyard. Rain drummed against the windowsill. Water ran off the roofs. The occasional passerby hurried along under umbrellas. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and sighed quietly. Behind her, Daniel sat on the couch, glued to his phone. They had barely spoken in the last few weeks, just existing in the same space like strangers. 7 months ago, Vera had gotten married, believing in a happy future. 7 months ago, it seemed like a long life together lay ahead. Children shared plans. Now she understood that everything had gone wrong, completely wrong. They had met 2 years ago at a home appliances trade show. Vera worked as an accountant for a trading company and had been there for 10 years already. She was a senior specialist, and the director often brought her along to business events. Daniel represented a partner firm handling sales. He approached her during a coffee break and struck up a conversation. Tall, confident, with a pleasant smile and attentive gaze. Vera was 29 years old and had stopped believing in fateful encounters. Several failed relationships in the past had taught her caution, but Daniel seemed different. He didn't talk about the weather or work, but about books, travel, life. He listened attentively, didn't interrupt, asked questions. He asked for her phone number, promised to call, and he did call. 3 days later, he invited her to the theater for a show that had been sold out for a month. It turned out he had connections. Vera agreed. Though she didn't usually go on dates with men she barely knew. They met every Saturday, theaters, museums, walks along the waterfront. Daniel was a gentleman, never late, always held the door, and helped with her coat. Vera gradually grew used to him. By the end of summer, they were meeting more often, on Wednesdays after work and on weekends. Daniel spoke little about his family, answering questions briefly. His mother lived alone. His father had died long ago. There were almost no other relatives. Vera didn't press for details. Everyone has topics they don't like to talk about. Vera's parents met Daniel with suspicion. Her father, George Henderson, had worked as an engineer at a factory his whole life and was a man of few words but keen perception. When Vera first brought Daniel home, her father shook his hand and nodded, but his gaze was heavy. Her mother, Patricia, a former elementary school teacher, tried to create a warm atmosphere, setting the table and asking about work. But Vera could see her parents didn't like the man. After 8 months of dating, Daniel proposed. It happened in March, when the city was just emerging from winter. They were sitting in his car after a movie, and he suddenly pulled out a small box with a ring and asked if she would agree to be his wife. Vera looked at the ring and felt a strange turmoil. Everything seemed right. They'd been together for a while. He was a good person. It was time to start a family. But something inside her had doubts. She pushed those thoughts away and said yes. They had the wedding at the end of April, a small affair with about 20 people at a cafe near her parents' house. From Daniel's side, only his mother, Linda Morrison, and 2 of his colleagues came. Vera was surprised then. Didn't he have any friends at all? But she said nothing. Linda Morrison turned out to be a heavy-set woman of about 50 with short hair and a stern gaze. She looked Vera up and down, nodded without warmth, and spent the entire evening sitting next to her son, whispering something to him. She barely spoke to Vera's parents, only nodding at their attempts to start a conversation. After the wedding, the question of housing arose. Daniel was renting a 1-bedroom apartment on the outskirts, and the lease was ending. Vera was also living in a rented studio. They didn't have money to buy their own place. Vera had $12,000 in her account, saved over several years. That would be enough for maybe a down payment on a mortgage. Daniel suggested temporarily living with Vera's parents for 3 months. They'd save money, find an apartment, get a mortgage, and move out. Her parents agreed, reluctantly. Her father just nodded and went to his room. Her mother sighed and began preparing a place for the young couple. In early May, they moved their things in. Daniel turned out to have a lot of stuff. Boxes of books, sports equipment, 2 large suitcases of clothes. Vera silently helped sort and arrange things in closets. Her parents kept their distance. The first month passed relatively peacefully. Daniel tried not to get in the way. On weekends they went out. Vera went to work. Daniel also disappeared for whole days. In the evenings they had dinner together, then went to their separate rooms. But by mid-June, the atmosphere began to change. Daniel started coming home later and later. First at 9 p.m., then 10 p.m., then after midnight. He answered questions curtly, stayed late at work, meeting with clients, traffic. Vera believed him at first, but her doubts grew. Her father frowned more and more when looking at his son-in-law. Her mother became quieter, smiled less. Vera felt the mounting tension, but didn't know how to deal with it. Talk to Daniel? He brushed off serious conversations. 3 months turned into 4, then 5. No one talked about the apartment anymore. At any hint from Vera, Daniel answered evasively, "Not the right time now. Crisis in the market. Salary was delayed. Need to save more." Vera put aside money from her salary, but understood she couldn't handle it alone, neither rent nor a mortgage. In July, the first serious incident occurred. Vera came home from work and discovered that money was missing from her makeup bag. $500 she had set aside to buy winter boots. She searched through her entire purse. The money wasn't there. She asked her mother. She hadn't taken it. Her father also shook his head. That left Daniel. Vera waited for him to come home and asked him directly. He was surprised, began to get indignant. How dare she accuse him? Vera insisted. There was no one else in the apartment. Daniel flared up, slammed the door, and left. He didn't return until morning. He went to bed without explaining anything. Vera didn't sleep all night. 3 days later, he silently placed $500 in new bills on the table. Vera took them without a word. She didn't keep money in her makeup bag anymore. August brought new problems. At Vera's work, reorganization began. The director gathered all the employees and announced the company was downsizing. Specific decisions would come in a month. Vera felt anxious. Her department was small for people and could easily be cut. She began working with doubled energy, staying late, taking on additional tasks, but she understood it might not help. Decisions were made at the top. She didn't tell anyone at home about this. Her parents were already stressed. Daniel wasn't interested in her affairs at all. Vera kept her anxiety to herself. At night, she slept poorly, going over possible scenarios. In September, the inevitable happened. The director called Vera in and informed her that her position was being eliminated. 2 weeks to hand over her duties. Severance pay equal to 3 months' salary. That was it. 10 years of work ended in 5 minutes. Vera left the office in a daze, sat at her desk, stared at the monitor. Her colleagues didn't dare approach. She sat like that until the end of the day, then gathered her things and went home. At home, she said calmly, "I was laid off." Her mother threw up her hands. Her father frowned. Daniel wasn't home. He came around 11. Vera told him the news. He shrugged. "Well, you'll find another job." His indifference hurt more than the firing itself. The next 2 weeks, Vera handed over her duties and looked for a new job. She sent out resumes, went to interviews. There were several offers, but the salary was lower everywhere. She chose a company in the neighboring district. They paid 15% less, but it was close to home and the team seemed decent. On her last working day, her colleagues threw a farewell party. Cake, flowers, warm words. Vera smiled, thanked them, but inside she felt empty. She packed her things into a box and left the office. At the new place, she had to get used to everything again. Different accounting software, different people, different rhythm. Vera managed, but every evening she came home exhausted. She ate dinner in silence and fell asleep immediately. Daniel continued appearing late, sometimes sleeping who knows where. October was memorable for cold rains and gray skies. Vera commuted to work in crowded subway cars, got soaked on the streets, came home without strength. The new job demanded proof of competence. At home, the tension continued. One evening, when Daniel was gone again, her father called Vera to the kitchen. They sat at the table. Her father was silent for a long time, then spoke quietly. He understood that it was hard for the young couple, understood that they needed their own space. But 6 months had passed, soon 7. Why wasn't Daniel taking any steps toward renting a place? Vera lowered her eyes. She had been asking herself the same question. Daniel wasn't saving money, wasn't looking for apartments, wasn't bringing up the topic as if he planned to live there forever. Her father continued. He didn't want to interfere in their lives, but it was hard on her mother. And he himself felt uncomfortable in his own apartment. He couldn't watch TV peacefully. Her mother was constantly on edge. They couldn't live like this. Vera nodded, promised to talk seriously with Daniel. Her father sighed and left. Vera waited for Daniel past midnight. When he came in, she stopped him and said they needed to talk. Daniel made a face. It was late. Vera insisted. Yes, right now. They sat in the room. Vera began calmly. More than 6 months had passed. It was hard on her parents. They needed to move out. Daniel listened, glued to his phone. Vera asked him to put the phone down. He reluctantly put down the device. Vera continued. They should start looking for an apartment, at least a rental. She had savings. He must have savings. Together they could rent something decent. Daniel frowned and said the money was needed for something else. His mother asked for help with repairs. The pipes were leaking. The plumbing needed to be replaced. Vera froze. So he was giving money to his mother instead of providing housing for his family? Daniel started getting irritated. His mother lived alone. It was hard for her. He couldn't abandon her. Housing could wait. Vera objected. It can't wait. My parents are at their limit. We need to decide now. Daniel jumped up and declared he was tired of her whining, that he was already working himself to the bone trying to earn money, and she was just pressuring him. He slammed the door and left. He didn't return until morning. After that conversation, a wall of silence hung between them. They barely communicated, slept in the same bed like strangers. Vera went to work, had dinner with her parents, sat in her room at the computer. Daniel disappeared until late. At the end of October, Vera accidentally came across a statement from her bank account. She opened it and froze. $10,000 had been withdrawn 3 days ago, but she hadn't withdrawn anything. The card was in her wallet. Vera remembered that a month ago Daniel had asked for her card, said his wasn't working, he urgently needed to withdraw money. She gave him the card and told him the PIN. He promised to withdraw only $200. Apparently, he memorized the code and used it later. Vera didn't make a scene. She simply changed the PIN and transferred the remaining balance to another account Daniel didn't know about. When he asked a week later if she could lend him money, she answered calmly, "No." November began with an unexpected call from Linda Morrison. She was calling Daniel, but spoke so loudly that Vera heard everything. Her mother-in-law wanted to come visit for a week, maybe 2. Daniel agreed immediately without asking either Vera or her parents. Vera found out about this by accident. After Daniel hung up, she asked, "When is your mother arriving?" He shrugged. In 3 days. Vera was indignant. Why didn't he consult her? This was her parents' apartment. Daniel brushed it off. Big deal, his mother was coming. Vera warned her parents. Her father clenched his jaw and said nothing. Her mother sighed. "What can we do? We'll accept her." Linda Morrison arrived Friday evening with 2 huge bags. She walked into the apartment, casually nodding to the hosts, and occupied the couch in the living room where her father usually sat. Daniel fussed around his mother. The first evening was tense. At dinner, her mother-in-law talked about her problems, health, neighbors' utilities. Vera's mother agreed sympathetically. Her father was silent. Vera also sat quietly, but irritation boiled inside her. The next day, Linda Morrison began settling in. She rearranged things in the kitchen, criticized Vera's mother's cooking, made a remark to her father that he was watching TV too loudly. Vera gritted her teeth. Her parents endured it. By Saturday evening, her mother-in-law was in full swing, declaring that the apartment was cold, the tea was brewed wrong, the floors were poorly washed. Vera's mother went pale but said nothing. Her father got up and went to his room. Vera couldn't stand it. She approached her mother-in-law and said firmly, "This is my parents' home. Everything here is arranged as convenient for the hosts. If you don't like something, you don't have to live here." Linda Morrison opened her mouth in indignation. Daniel jumped up and started yelling at Vera. How dare she talk to his mother like that? Vera didn't raise her voice, just repeated, "This apartment is not yours and not your mother's. My parents live here, and these are their rules." Daniel grabbed his jacket, took his mother by the arm, and they left. They didn't return until late at night. Linda Morrison silently went to the living room, lay down on the couch, turning away. Daniel went into the room, lay down next to Vera without saying a word. In the morning, her mother-in-law packed her things and left without saying goodbye. Daniel was gloomier than a storm cloud. For several days, he and Vera didn't talk at all. A heavy atmosphere reigned in the apartment. A week later, Daniel finally spoke, said they needed to discuss everything. Vera agreed. They sat in the kitchen late in the evening. Daniel began by saying that Vera had offended his mother. Linda Morrison was very upset. Vera should apologize. Vera shook her head. No, she was defending her parents. Daniel frowned and said his mother was the closest person to him. She raised him alone, and he wouldn't let anyone offend his mother. Vera objected. She didn't offend her. She just set boundaries. The conversation reached a dead end. Daniel insisted on an apology. Vera refused. In the end, he got up and left, slamming the door. December brought cold and blizzards. Vera commuted to work in crowded subway cars, froze at bus stops, came home exhausted. She was gradually settling in at her new job. Management was pleased. Relations with Daniel remained cold. They lived like neighbors, hardly crossing paths. Her parents tried not to interfere, but Vera saw their worried looks. Before New Year's, something happened that changed everything. Vera was sorting through documents and accidentally found a receipt from Daniel's jacket pocket. A receipt from a restaurant in the city center. Amount, $1,200. Date, 2 days ago. That evening when he said he was delayed at work. Vera held the receipt and felt everything inside grow cold. $1,200 for dinner at a restaurant, while they lived with her parents, because supposedly there was no money, while he begged his mother for money for repairs, while she was economizing on lunches. She put the receipt on the table and waited. Daniel returned around 10. Vera silently showed him the receipt. He looked at it and went pale. He tried to explain a business meeting with clients. Vera asked coldly, "Which ones?" "Name the company, the names." Daniel stammered, started getting angry. She was conducting an interrogation. Vera didn't let up. "Name at least one name." Daniel couldn't. He grabbed his jacket and left. Her father was sitting in the kitchen and heard everything. When Daniel left, he called Vera. She sat across from him. Her father was silent for a long time, then spoke quietly. That evening, he had seen Daniel leaving the building not alone. With him was a woman, young, with long dark hair. They stood there. Daniel was saying something. She was laughing. Then a taxi pulled up and they left together. Her father hadn't said anything before, wasn't sure, but now he couldn't stay silent. Vera sat there, digesting the information. So it was even worse than she thought. Her husband wasn't just spending money on who knows what. He was meeting someone, lying to her face. Her father continued. He wanted to say directly, "You can't live like this." Daniel didn't respect her, didn't respect their family, lived at their expense, and still allowed himself such behavior. Vera was an adult and would decide for herself, but her father had to tell the truth. Vera nodded, thanked him for his honesty, got up and went to her room. She lay on the bed and began to think. By morning, she had made a decision. She found a private investigator online, gave him Daniel's photo, description, schedule. The detective took the job and said, "In a week there will be a report." Vera continued living as usual. She went to work, came back, had dinner with her parents. She barely spoke to Daniel. He was also silent, disappearing until late. A week later, the report arrived. The detective attached photographs and a description. The woman's name was Christina, 26 years old. She worked at the same company as Daniel. They met regularly 3 to 4 times a week. They had dinner in restaurants, went to the movies, sometimes drove out of town in her car. Vera read the report and felt neither pain nor anger, only a strange emptiness. So all this time he had been seeing someone else. All the lies, all the excuses. Now everything fell into place. She printed the photos and report, put them in a folder, put it in a desk drawer. The decision would come later, but she had the information. When the time came, she would use it. They spent New Year's tensely. Her parents set the table. Vera helped. Daniel came an hour before midnight. He sat in silence. When the clock struck 12, they clinked glasses, but there was no joy. Vera looked at her husband and thought, "How much longer will this continue?" January brought frost and clear skies. Vera continued working. She was appreciated at the company. There was talk of a promotion. This made her happy, but her personal life remained at a dead end. Daniel disappeared, lied, had no intention of changing anything. One evening at the end of January, Linda Morrison called again. She spoke loudly and for a long time. Vera heard fragments. A son should help his mother, should visit, should think about her. Daniel listened, nodded, promised. When he hung up, Vera asked, "What does your mother want?" Daniel answered evasively, "Just talking." Vera insisted, "About what specifically?" Daniel frowned. It was his business. Vera didn't let up. Daniel flared up. His mother wanted him to come more often, help around the house. Vera remarked coldly, "And you forgot about your wife." Daniel looked at her with irritation and said he was tired of complaints, that he was working, earning, trying, and she was just nagging. Vera smirked. Working? Going to restaurants with Christina. Daniel froze. He asked quietly, "How do you know?" Vera took out the folder with photos and the report, put it on the table. Daniel took it and started leafing through. His face changed. He went pale, then red. He threw the folder on the table and started making excuses. It wasn't what she thought. Just a colleague. They met for work. Vera shook her head. "Don't lie. Everything is written there." Daniel fell silent, then said quietly, "Just talking. Nothing serious." Vera laughed. "Nothing serious?" 3 times a week. Restaurants, movies, trips. Daniel lowered his head. Vera continued, "And where's the money from? After all, supposedly there isn't even enough for an apartment." Daniel said nothing. Vera stood up and said she was giving him a week to think. During that time, he had to decide. Either he ended things with Christina and started living normally, or he packed his things and left. There was no third option. Daniel jumped up and started saying something, but Vera raised her hand. 1 week. There's nothing more to discuss. She left the room. The next week, Daniel hardly appeared at home. He came to spend the night, left in the morning. Vera waited. Her parents were silent, but supported her with their looks. A week later, on Sunday evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. With him was Linda Morrison. They entered the apartment with determined faces. Vera's parents were sitting in the kitchen. Vera was with them. Daniel and his mother went to the kitchen. Linda Morrison sat at the table without asking permission. Daniel stood nearby. Her mother-in-law spoke first. She had endured her daughter-in-law's antics for a long time. Rudeness, disrespect, inability to be a wife. But enough was enough. Daniel was her son, her life, and she wouldn't let some girl control him. Vera listened silently. Her father clenched his jaw. Her mother lowered her eyes. Linda Morrison continued. She was offering a solution. She had a 2-bedroom apartment. Daniel and Vera could move in with her. Vera's parents would live peacefully. The young couple would get a room, and she wouldn't be alone. Vera smirked. Move in with my mother-in-law? Seriously? Linda Morrison nodded. Yes. Seriously. Vera shook her head. No. I'm not going to live with my mother-in-law under any conditions. Linda Morrison began to protest, but Vera interrupted. The conversation is over. Daniel intervened and said that Vera was selfish, thought only of herself, didn't want to compromise. Vera turned to him. Compromise? Living with your mother is a compromise? After you've been cheating? Linda Morrison jumped up. What? What cheating? Daniel went pale. Vera took out her phone and showed the photos. Her mother-in-law looked at the screen, her face turning from pale to red. She lowered the phone and looked at her son. Daniel lowered his eyes. Linda Morrison sat back down, was silent for a minute, then spoke more quietly. Even if that's true, Vera should forgive him. Men make mistakes. You need to preserve the family. Vera laughed. Forgive him for what? For lying, cheating, spending money on another woman? For living as a freeloader and still ordering everyone around? Daniel suddenly straightened up and said firmly, You know what? I'm tired. Tired of listening to complaints. Tired of living in this stuffiness. My mother is right. We need to move in with her. Vera looked at him and asked calmly, We or you? Daniel frowned. Both of us. Vera shook her head. No, I'm not going. Daniel raised his voice. Then that's your problem. I'm tired of putting up with this. Mother is offering a solution and you're refusing. So you don't want to save the family. Vera stood up and said quietly but firmly, I want to save a family, but not with you. Not with a man who lies, cheats, and brings his mother to decide for him. Daniel grabbed his head and started shouting, You're impossible. It's impossible to live with you. You're always dissatisfied. Vera didn't raise her voice, just repeated, Then go to your mother, to Christina, wherever you want. But leave this house. Linda Morrison jumped up and started shouting something. Daniel joined in. Vera stood silently. Her parents didn't interfere either. Then her father suddenly stood up, looked at Daniel and Linda Morrison, and said, quietly, but in such a way that everyone fell silent, This is our apartment. We accepted you because our daughter asked. We endured for 7 months. But enough. You are no longer residents here. Linda Morrison began to protest. Her father raised his hand and repeated, Enough. Pack your things. Daniel tried to say something. Her father looked at him in such a way that he fell silent. Daniel turned to Vera and said loudly and clearly, Mom will live with us, and your parents can manage just fine on the balcony. A deathly silence hung in the kitchen. Vera froze. Her father clenched his fists. Her mother gasped. Linda Morrison quickly nodded. Yes, exactly. You'll give us a room, and you'll manage somehow. After all, we're in trouble. Daniel, realizing he had said something wrong, tried to correct himself. Well, I didn't express that right. We would just take a room and you. But her father didn't let him finish. He stepped forward and grabbed Daniel by the shoulder. Pack up immediately. Both of you. Linda Morrison tried to object, but George Henderson's look made her shut up. She grabbed her bag, turned around, and headed for the exit, muttering something about ingratitude. Daniel stood with his mouth open, then looked at Vera, expecting support. But Vera was silent. She just looked at him, at the man who had just proposed evicting her parents to the balcony in their own apartment. Daniel pressed his lips together, turned around, and followed his mother. The door slammed. Vera slowly lowered herself into a chair. Her mother came over and hugged her shoulders. Her father sighed heavily and went to his room. And Vera sat there understanding. This is it. The finale. Now it's definitely the end. And for the first time in many months, she felt relief. 3 days had passed since Daniel and his mother left. 3 days of silence that Vera hadn't felt in a long time. She woke up in the morning in her room where other people's things no longer lay around, where it didn't smell of someone else's cologne, where irritating snoring no longer sounded. The apartment seemed to sigh with relief. Her parents had changed too. Her father turned the TV on to normal volume again. Her mother sang in the kitchen while preparing breakfast. At dinner they talked about everyday matters, joked, smiled, as if the last 7 months had been a bad dream from which they had finally awakened. Vera went to work, came back, helped around the house, sat by the window in the evenings with a book. Sometimes she caught herself waiting for a call or message from Daniel, but the phone was silent. On the 4th day, Linda Morrison called. Vera saw the name on the screen and looked at it for a long time, deciding whether to answer or not. In the end, she answered. "Vera, hello." Her mother-in-law's voice sounded strained. "I need to talk to you alone." Vera was silent. Linda Morrison continued. "I understand there's been a lot of misunderstanding between us, but we're adults. We can meet and discuss everything calmly." Vera thought for a second. She could refuse, but curiosity won out. What could her mother-in-law say after that scene? "All right," she agreed. "Tomorrow at a cafe near my work at 1 o'clock. Linda Morrison quickly agreed. They said goodbye. Vera put down the phone and thought. What was her mother-in-law planning? Apologies or more manipulation? The next day, Vera arrived at the cafe exactly at 1. Linda Morrison was already sitting at a table by the window. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes, hair carelessly styled, tension on her face. Vera sat across from her. They ordered coffee and were silent until the waiter brought the order. Then Linda Morrison spoke. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you'd agree." Vera nodded, but said nothing. Her mother-in-law continued. "I want to talk about Daniel, about your marriage, about what happened." Vera took a sip of coffee, put down the cup, and said calmly, "I'm listening." Linda Morrison sighed. "I know I didn't behave in the best way. I understand I was too insistent, but you have to understand me. Daniel is my only child. Everything I have." Vera was silent. Linda Morrison continued. "When he got married, I was happy. I thought now he would have a family, support. But then I saw how you treated him. Demanding, criticizing, not letting him live peacefully." Vera smirked. "I didn't let him live peacefully? Seriously?" Linda Morrison nodded. "Yes. You're always dissatisfied. Daniel tries, works, and you just make claims." Vera set down her cup harder than she intended. Coffee splashed onto the saucer. "Linda, let's be honest. Your son lived at my parents' place as a freeloader for 7 months. Didn't pay rent, didn't help, didn't save money for renting a place. But he was meeting another woman and spending money on her in restaurants. At the same time, he said there was no money for an apartment. Do you call that trying?" Linda Morrison pursed her lips. Daniel had difficulties at work, his salary was delayed. And that woman is just a colleague. Vera laughed. "A colleague he saw 3 times a week, gave flowers to, who held his hand in cafes." Her mother-in-law looked away. Men sometimes seek understanding elsewhere if they're not appreciated at home. Vera shook her head. "If your son was seeking understanding, he could have talked to me. But instead he lied, cheated, and still blamed me for everything." Linda Morrison fell silent, then said quietly, "I don't want you to get divorced. Daniel loves you. He just doesn't know how to show it." Vera stood up. Linda, I came here because I wanted to give you a chance to say something important. But you're defending your son again and blaming me. This conversation is over. She took her purse. Linda Morrison grabbed her hand. Wait, I haven't said everything yet. Vera stopped. Her mother-in-law released her hand and spoke quickly. Daniel wants to come back. He's asking you to give him one more chance. He promises to change. Break up with that woman. Start saving for an apartment. Vera looked at her for a long time. And you believe he'll change? Linda Morrison nodded. Yes. He's my son. I know him. Vera smirked. Then explain one thing to me. If he really wants to come back and change, why did you come and not him? Her mother-in-law opened her mouth but couldn't find an answer. Vera continued. Because even now he's hiding behind your skirt, sending his mother to fix his problems. That's your changed son. Linda Morrison went pale. He's just afraid you'll refuse. And he's right to be afraid, Vera interrupted. Because I'm refusing. Forever. Tell him the divorce is inevitable. He should prepare for the paperwork. She turned around and left the cafe. Outside, she stopped and took a deep breath of cold air. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from anger. How dare they think she would come back after everything? That evening at home, Vera told her parents about the meeting. Her father frowned. The nerve to send his mother to persuade. Her mother sighed. Maybe he really was afraid? Vera shook her head. If a person really wants to fix things, he comes himself, apologizes himself, admits his mistakes himself. He doesn't send his mother. Her father nodded. You're right. A man should answer for his actions. They closed the topic, had dinner, went to their rooms. Vera went to bed late, couldn't fall asleep for a long time, replaying the conversation with her mother-in-law in her head. And she understood that the decision had been made definitively. Divorce. In the morning, she got up early, got ready for work. On the subway, she took out her phone, found the number of a lawyer that a colleague had once recommended, typed a message. Hello, I need a consultation on divorce proceedings. Sent it. At work, she immersed herself in tasks. By lunch, the lawyer had replied, We can meet tomorrow. Vera agreed that evening and wrote down the address. The day passed quickly. In the evening, she came home, had dinner with her parents, watched a TV series, went to bed calmly. The decision had been made. There was no fear. The next day after work, Vera went to the lawyer. The office was in an old building downtown, on the 3rd floor. Vera climbed the stairs and knocked on the door with a consultation sign. Come in, came from inside. She entered. The office was small but cozy. A woman of about 40 in glasses with a neat hairstyle sat at a desk. She stood up and extended her hand. Olivia Mitchell. Come in, sit down. Vera sat down. The lawyer opened a notebook. So, you wanted to consult about divorce. Tell me the situation. Vera briefly outlined it. 7 months of marriage, no joint property, no children. Husband was unfaithful. She wanted to get divorced as quickly as possible. Olivia Mitchell listened, took notes, then looked up. The situation is standard. If your husband agrees to divorce, the process will take a month through the county clerk. If not, through court. That takes longer, 2 to 3 months minimum. Vera nodded. And if he doesn't agree, but I still want a divorce? Through court, the lawyer answered. You'll have to prove that preserving the marriage is impossible. Witness testimony, evidence of infidelity. If there is, the court will side with you, but it will take more time. Vera thought. Can the process be sped up? Olivia Mitchell shook her head. The law establishes time frames. But if you gather all the documents in advance, file the petition correctly, avoid mistakes, you'll save time. Vera nodded. I understand. And how much will your services cost? The lawyer named a sum. Vera calculated affordable. She agreed. Olivia Mitchell gave her a list of documents she needed to collect. They agreed to meet in a week. Vera left the office with a sense of relief. She had a plan. She had a lawyer. Things were moving forward. At home, she told her parents about the visit to the lawyer. Her father nodded approvingly. Her mother asked, "Will he be against it?" Vera shrugged. "I don't know. But even if he is, that's his problem." The next few days were spent gathering documents. Vera went to the county clerk's office, got a copy of the marriage certificate, made photocopies of passports, wrote a petition, put everything in a folder. A week later, she met with the lawyer again. Olivia Mitchell checked the documents and nodded. "Everything's in order. Now, you need to notify your husband of your intention to file for divorce. Better in writing, so there's documentation." Vera took out her phone. "I can write a message." The lawyer nodded. "Yes, that works. Write that you're filing for divorce. Indicate the filing date. Let him know in advance." Vera typed, "Daniel, I'm notifying you that I'm filing for divorce. Documents will be filed with the county clerk the day after tomorrow. If you agree, the process will go quickly. If not, through court." She sent it. The reply came in 5 minutes. "Are you serious? Maybe we can discuss this one more time." Vera wrote, "No. The decision is final. Daniel, I can fix everything. Give me a chance." Vera, "No, Daniel." "Daniel, then I won't give my consent. You'll have to divorce through court." Vera showed the exchange to the lawyer. Olivia Mitchell smirked. Typical reaction. Doesn't want to let go, but doesn't want to change either. "No problem. We'll divorce through court. Do you have evidence of infidelity?" Vera nodded. "Photos. A detective's report." "Excellent," the lawyer said. "That's enough. File the lawsuit. I'll help you draft it. The court will be scheduled in about a month." Vera agreed. They drafted the complaint. The lawyer explained the procedure and gave approximate time frames. They said goodbye. Vera went out onto the street and felt everything was under control. The next day, she filed the lawsuit in court. They accepted the documents, gave her a receipt, and said, "Wait for the summons. The court will be scheduled within a month." Vera returned home and told her parents. Her father hugged his daughter. "Well done. You're doing the right thing." Her mother stroked her head. "Don't worry. Everything will be fine." Vera smiled. She wasn't worried. On the contrary, she felt stronger than ever. 2 weeks passed. Life settled into a calm rhythm. Work, home, occasional meetings with girlfriends. Vera felt free. No tension, no lies. Just ordinary life. And then on Saturday morning, there was a knock at the door. Vera opened it. Daniel stood on the threshold, alone without his mother. He looked unwell, unshaven, rumpled jacket, weariness in his eyes. "Vera, I need to talk," he said dully. Vera didn't let him in. "Talk here." Daniel looked back at the stairs and sighed. "All right. I wanted to say that I understood I was wrong. Very wrong. I realized I lost you, and I want you back." Vera crossed her arms over her chest. Daniel shook his head. "No, you don't understand. I really have changed. I broke up with Christina, got a new job that pays more, started saving money. Look." He took out his phone and showed her a bank statement. Indeed, there was $5,000 there. Vera looked but wasn't impressed. "So what?" Daniel put away his phone. "I'm showing you I'm ready to change, ready to rent an apartment, live separately, build a normal family." Vera shook her head. "Daniel, the problem isn't the money. The problem is that you lied, cheated, lived at someone else's expense, and still told the hosts what to do. And most importantly, you proposed evicting my parents to the balcony." Daniel winced. "I was angry. I said something stupid. I didn't think." "Exactly," Vera said coldly. "You didn't think because you never cared about others. You only thought about yourself and your mother." Daniel lowered his head. "You're right. I was selfish. But I can change. Let me prove it." Vera sighed. "Daniel, I don't want to give chances. I want a divorce. You'll receive a court summons. Come if you want to say something to the judge, but my decision won't change. Daniel looked up. Anger flashed in his eyes. So that's it? You're just erasing me from your life. Vera nodded. Yes, exactly. Daniel clenched his fists. Fine. If that's how it is, I'll fight. I'll drag out the process. Find a lawyer. Prove you're the one at fault. Vera smirked. Try. I have evidence of your infidelity. Detective's testimony. Photographs. The court will side with me. Daniel went pale. You had me followed. I protected myself, Vera answered calmly. And I did the right thing. Daniel stood for another minute, then turned around and left without saying goodbye. Vera closed the door and leaned her back against it, taking a deep breath. Her father came out of the room. He came? Vera nodded. Yes. He asked me to come back. I refused. Her father put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Right? People like that don't change. Vera went to the kitchen and made tea. Her mother sat by the window knitting, looked at her daughter. Was it hard? Vera shook her head. No, Mom. Not hard at all. And it was the truth. She felt no regret, only relief. 3 weeks later, the summons arrived. The court was scheduled for the 25th. 10 days away. Vera called the lawyer. She said, get ready. Gather witnesses, if you have any. Vera asked her parents if they agreed to come to court and confirm that Daniel had lived with them and hadn't contributed money for housing. Her parents agreed. The court date was approaching. Vera wasn't nervous. She knew the truth was on her side. There was evidence. The lawyer was experienced. Everything would be fine. The evening before the court, Linda Morrison called. Vera looked at the screen for a long time, then finally answered. Vera, it's me. Her mother-in-law's voice sounded pleading. I'm begging you, don't do this. Don't destroy the family. Daniel is suffering. Vera answered wearily. Linda, the family was destroyed when your son cheated and lied. I'm just making it official. Her mother-in-law started crying. But he's my son, my only one. You're depriving him of a chance at happiness. Vera said coldly, no. He deprived himself of that chance. And deprived me too. Goodbye. She hung up and blocked the number. She didn't want to hear these manipulations anymore. On the morning of the 25th, Vera woke up early. She dressed strictly, dark pants, white blouse, blazer. She gathered a folder with documents and had breakfast with her parents. They also dressed formally. The three of them went to court. The county courthouse was gray and dreary. Inside it smelled of old paper and bleach. They went up to the 3rd floor, found the right office, sat on a bench in the hallway, and waited. 10 minutes later, Olivia Mitchell appeared, Vera's lawyer. She approached, greeted them, checked the documents, and nodded. Everything's in order. Let's go. They entered the courtroom, a small room with a table for the judge, 2 tables for the parties, several chairs. Vera sat at one table with her parents and lawyer nearby. Daniel sat across from them alone, without a lawyer. He looked tense. The judge entered, a woman of about 50 in a robe with a case file. She sat at the table and opened the case. We are hearing the case for dissolution of marriage between Vera Henderson and Daniel Morrison. Please introduce yourselves. Vera stood. Plaintiff, Vera Henderson. Daniel also stood. Defendant, Daniel Morrison. The judge nodded. Sit down. Plaintiff, state your claims. Vera stood again and began calmly. I request dissolution of marriage with the defendant due to the impossibility of preserving the family. The defendant systematically violated marital obligations, did not participate in supporting the family, had an extramarital affair, and showed disrespect to my family. The judge listened and took notes, then addressed Daniel. Defendant, your position. Daniel stood and spoke quietly. I admit I made mistakes, but I want to save the family. I ask for a reconciliation period. The judge looked at Vera. Plaintiff, do you agree to a reconciliation period? Vera answered clearly, no. Reconciliation is impossible. The judge nodded. Very well. Plaintiff, present your evidence. Olivia Mitchell stood and handed the judge a folder. We present a private investigator's report showing that the defendant systematically met with another woman. Photographs confirming the extramarital affair are attached. We also present testimony from the plaintiff's parents, with whom the defendant lived for 8 months without paying rent. The judge took the folder and began reviewing it. Daniel went pale. The judge looked up. Defendant, what do you have to say about the evidence presented? Daniel was silent, then said quietly, It was a mistake. I regret it. The judge nodded. I see. I call the witnesses. Vera's parents took turns giving testimony. They confirmed that Daniel had lived with them for 8 months, hadn't given money, hadn't helped, and behaved disrespectfully. The judge took notes. When the witnesses finished, the judge addressed Daniel. Defendant, do you dispute the witnesses' testimony? Daniel lowered his head. No. The judge closed the folder. The court will deliberate. She left the courtroom. Everyone remained seated in silence. Vera could feel her heart pounding, but she was confident the decision would be in her favor. 20 minutes later, the judge returned. Everyone stood. The judge sat down, opened a paper, and began reading. The court has established the following. Defendant Daniel Morrison systematically violated marital duties, did not participate in supporting the family, had an extramarital affair, which is confirmed by the evidence presented. Plaintiff Vera Henderson does not wish to preserve the marriage, which is her right. Based on the foregoing, the court decides to dissolve the marriage between Vera Henderson and Daniel Morrison. The decision takes effect in 1 month if not appealed. Vera exhaled. It was done. Divorce. Official. The judge stood. The hearing is concluded. Everyone left the courtroom. Vera hugged her parents and thanked the lawyer. Olivia Mitchell smiled. Congratulations. In a month, you'll receive your divorce certificate. Vera nodded and glanced at Daniel. He was standing by the window, looking out at the street. She didn't approach, didn't say goodbye, just left the courthouse. Outside it was sunny and warm. Her parents walked beside her. Her father said, Well, that's that. You're free, Vera. She smiled. Yes, Dad. Free. They went home. That evening, her mother made Vera's favorite dish, fried potatoes with mushrooms. They had dinner and talked about pleasant things. No one mentioned the court. After dinner, Vera sat by the window, looking at the city and thinking, It's over. This chapter of life is turned. Now a new one begins. A month later, Vera received her divorce certificate. She held the document in her hands and felt truly, officially free. She put the certificate in a folder with her documents. Done. Daniel was in the past. Linda Morrison was in the past. This whole story was in the past. Vera continued working. At work, she got a promotion. Now she was lead accountant. Her salary increased. She saved money, planning to rent her own apartment. 3 months after the divorce, Vera found a nice 1-bedroom apartment near the subway. She signed the lease and moved her things. Her parents helped. By evening, everything was in place. Vera stood in the middle of her new apartment and smiled. Her space, her life. No one would lie, cheat, or order her around. Just her. She furnished the apartment gradually, bought new furniture, hung curtains, arranged books. Every evening, she came home with pleasure. This was her place. She signed up for yoga, started going to the pool, met her neighbor, a pleasant woman in her 30s, also divorced. Sometimes they had tea together and talked. Life was getting better. There was no husband, but there was peace. No family, but there was freedom. Vera realized she was happy alone. Vera visited her parents every weekend. They were glad to see their daughter happy. Her father once said, You know, I'm proud of you. You didn't break. You managed. Vera hugged her father. Thank you, Dad. You helped me a lot. Her mother also hugged her daughter. The main thing is that you're happy. Vera nodded. Yes, Mom. I'm happy. and it was the truth. She really was happy, not because she found a new man or built a career, but simply because she lived the way she wanted, respected herself, and didn't tolerate what shouldn't be tolerated. But life, as always, had a surprise in store. A year after the divorce, on an ordinary Thursday, Vera was returning from work, climbing the stairs to her apartment, and saw two people on the landing, Daniel and Linda Morrison, with suitcases. Vera froze. What were they doing here? How did they find her new address? And most importantly, why? Daniel saw her and stood up. Vera, wait. We need to talk. Vera came closer, but not to them, to her door. About what? Linda Morrison spoke plaintively. Vera, dear, we're in trouble. I was evicted from my apartment. Debts on utilities, court, all that. I have nowhere to go. And Daniel is also in a difficult situation. He lost his job, no money. We thought. Vera looked at her coldly. What did you think? Daniel interrupted. Well, maybe you could let us stay for a while, a month or two, until Mom finds a place and I find work. Vera laughed, long and hysterically. Are you serious? You came to me asking for housing after everything. Linda Morrison nodded eagerly. Well, yes. After all, you're kind. You wouldn't leave an elderly woman on the street. Vera stopped laughing and looked at her mother-in-law with a long stare. Linda, I'm not kind. I'm just reasonable. And a reasonable person doesn't let into their home those who betrayed them. Daniel tried a different approach. Vera, please. I understand I was wrong, but Mom is really in trouble. She really has nowhere to go. Vera opened the door to her apartment. That's not my problem. You created this situation yourselves. You deal with it yourselves. Linda Morrison started crying. Daniel grabbed Vera's arm. You can't do this. She has no roof over her head. Vera pulled her arm away. I can, and I'll prove it right now. She went into the apartment and closed the door, leaning her back against it. Behind the door, voices sounded. Daniel was calling. Linda Morrison was pleading. Vera didn't open. After 10 minutes, they left. Vera heard footsteps on the stairs, the slam of the entrance door. Silence. She went to the kitchen, made tea, sat by the window, looked at the evening city and smiled. They thought she would give in, feel sorry, let them in. But they were wrong. Vera Henderson had always known her worth, always respected herself, and no one, not her ex-husband, not his mother, could make her change that principle. She continued living her life, working, traveling, meeting with friends. She wasn't looking for a relationship, just living and being happy. Truly happy, because she had learned the most important thing, to respect herself and not tolerate what shouldn't be tolerated. And that made her truly free.